Alrighty, we are back with Dissident by Lisa Beeson. Book 4 in the Transcendent series. We're gonna try and get going on this. Chapter 2. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry, I'm kind of being quick about it because it was kind of a struggle to get it set up. And I'm just trying to do it, Just do it. Alrighty. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, and I just lost it. Boom. Boom. Bam. And a little bit of that. There we go. Alrighty. Skylar absently stroked the silky black fur of the purring, notched-eared cat, lying contentedly in her lap. She was only half listening to old Enzo playing on his strange little guitar he called a mandolin. He was sitting on the steps of his porch, while she sat on the soft grass in front of her tent. The mural of circus animals on the side of his weird little house captivated her. The longer she stared at them by the light of the dancing flames in the fire pit, the more it seemed like they were actually moving along with the music. She looked up through the triangular glass panels of the upside-down fishbowl, which everyone insisted on calling a dome, to the brilliant splash of stars in the indigo sky above. She tried to pick out the very brightest one to wish upon, even though she knew the blue fairy only existed in the make-believe Pinocchio world. It didn't hurt to try, just in case. Please help Soren and Ari come back to me, she wished over and over in hopes that the insistence of her wish would make it come true. Old Enzo's song ended, and he started playing a tune Skylar only half remembered maybe hearing before. The melody stirred up strange feelings of homesickness for something mysteriously absent from her mind. Glancing over at the old man, she thought about how she had always been scared of him before. But now that she knew him better, he was one of her favorite adults. He was one of the only people who looked her right in the eyes instead of always glancing at the big red birthmark on the right side of her face. They actually had a lot in common. Since his eyes were two different colors, he knew what it was like to have people stare. He wore whatever he felt like wearing, whether it matched or not, just like she did. And he loved animals, just like she did. They both knew that animals did not care what you looked like, as long as you loved them. She also appreciated Enzo's quiet, steady presence. He left her alone when she needed it, and he didn't make her do anything she didn't want to do. He let her sleep whenever she wanted to, with Nero always curled up faithfully by her side, and there was always food available when she was hungry. He played songs for her, and sometimes at night he'd smoke his stinky pipe and tell her stories about the circus. That was always her favorite distraction. Despite his aversion to people, he was a great storyteller, and nighttime was always the hardest for her without Soren. They had never been apart for so long in their entire lives. Everything felt wrong without her twin brother. It was as if she had stepped out of her real life into a strange one where nothing made sense. Kind of like how Alice felt in Wonderland. It felt as if half of her was missing. She had always been a part of a pair, and without Soren, she didn't know who she was anymore. Nero's head popped up from her lap, and his ears began to twitch, searching. He uncurled himself from the nest of her crossed legs and stalked off to hide under Enzo's house. It was then that she noticed the music had stopped, replaced by the sounds of whispering voices calling her name, like an eerie wind blowing through the trees. With her heart thumping in her chest, Skylar turned to Enzo for assurance, but he had completely disappeared, mandolin and all. Skylar frantically scanned the empty dome. Where did he go? Skylar, help us. Her mommy's voice called out to her. Please, baby, we need you, her daddy's voice begged. Skylar felt like a knot of snakes was writhing in her belly. What were her parents doing here? Everyone said that her parents were bad people who did bad things. But they were still her parents, who she hadn't seen in a very long time. And curiosity got the better of her. Maybe Grandma Mara let them come because they made amends for the bad stuff they did. Skylar cautiously tipped over to the pond. Instead of seeing the brightly colored fish that were usually swimming in there, she saw her parents' heads break through the surface as they began to tread through the water. Jump in, baby, and we'll go get Soren, her daddy said as he beckoned her with his outstretched hand. Then we can be a family again, her mommy said, smiling. The smile reminded Skylar of the random memory flashes she would sometimes get of her parents, happy and laughing with her and Soren. When she had told Soren about the flashes, he said that he got them too. But Gordon and Grandma Mara said that it was just because they wanted it to be true. The memories felt too real to be just make-believe. Skylar wanted her parents to be happy, so she tentatively reached out towards her daddy's large, strong hand. Just as her fingers were about to touch his hand shot out and painfully clutched onto her wrist as he pulled her into the water. As soon as she broke through the surface, both of her parents morphed into hideous sea monsters. The small pond had become an immense dark ocean that was swallowing her up as the monsters dragged her down into its inky depths. Skylar began flailing and kicking at them with all her might, fighting harder than she ever had before. They wanted her to stay forever in the dark where it was cold and scary. Miraculously, she managed to free herself from the monster's slimy grasp and immediately began pumping her arms and kicking her legs. She swam just as Wyatt had taught her to, and bit by bit she made it up towards the sparkling light of the surface. Just as she was about to break through, her hands and head hit a solid barrier, as if there was a thick sheet of ice on top. Panic seized her lungs. I'm trapped! She knew the monsters were right below her, ready to drag her back into the darkness at any moment. As Skylar desperately pounded against the barrier, her lungs began to burn and ache. She knew that she had to breathe or she would die. Her fear and dread made her arms and legs feel heavy. She let out the last breath in her lungs in a bubbly scream for help, losing hope that anyone would hear her. Just then, a shadow blocked out the moonlight, and two hands crashed through the hard surface and held onto hers, lifting her easily up through the hole in the barrier. When Skylar's head broke free of the water, she gasped in a lung of full air. Before she knew what was happening, strong arms brought her into a warm embrace. I got you, Skylar. You're safe now. I got you. A wonderfully familiar voice crooned. She immediately felt safe and secure. Ari, Skylar whispered as she clutched onto the girl that she considered her big sister. You saved me. You came back and you saved me from the monsters. I knew you'd come back. The wishing worked. She was so happy that Ari was actually here with her again, that all her fears seemed to melt away. No monster could ever stand a chance against Ari. Ever since Soren had been gone, Skylar had become more sensitive to other people's feelings, which was another reason she liked staying on the roof with Enzo. Up here, she didn't have to deal with everyone else's anger and worry. And now, being held in Ari's arms, Skylar could feel Ari's happiness. But there was also a painful sadness. Also a deep, heavy tiredness that Skylar couldn't quite understand. It was as though something had changed in Ari, and some of her lightness, her Ari-ness, had dimmed. Skylar didn't want her to be sad. Ari was special. Ari was the one who made everything better. Skylar clutched onto her tighter, knowing that it was now her turn to try to make things better. Don't be sad, Ari. You're with me now, and I love you forever and always. Skylar felt Ari's chest rise and fall in a deep, shaky breath, and then there was a kiss placed atop her wet head. Thank you, Skylar. I love you too, forever and always. Skylar smiled from ear to ear. Ari's heavy tiredness was still there, but at least some of the sadness gave way to love and gratitude. Skylar drew away from Ari's embrace, eager to ask her about her adventures fighting the darkness that Alvaro had seen in his visions. But 4 gigantic orange and white fish were swimming above them inside old Enzo's dome. They were playing follow the leader while weaving in and out of the trees around Enzo's house, as they would in a real fishbowl. She recognized them as the ones that should have been in the pond, instead of the sea monsters. Except now they were the size of dolphins. Ari curiously glanced up at them too, then brought her attention back down to Skylar's open mouth. You lost your tooth, she said with a small, amused smile. Uh-huh, a couple days ago. She absently tongued the empty slot where her front tooth has been, as she watched the giant fish's progression around the dome. The moon was now so big and bright that it covered everything with a magical, shimmery glow. What else has been going on Science Keep? Blech. What else has been going on at Science Keep since I've been gone? Skylar wanted to answer her, but it was too hard to concentrate with the fish swimming right over the top of them. Too excited to stay still, Skylar jumped out of Ari's lap. As the last fish swam by, Skylar reached her hand up and stretched on her tippy toes. She was just in time for the tips of her fingers to skim the shiny belly of the fish. Gold and copper scales showered down around her. Skylar danced and twirled with a glee as the sparkly scales floated in the air like fairy dust settling to the ground. It seemed the more she twirled, the drier her clothes and hair became. So she spun round and round until she was almost completely dry. But then Ari was suddenly kneeling in front of her and gently holding onto her shoulders so she would stop spinning and look at her. Ari was so tall that even on her knees she was almost eye to eye with Skylar. I need you to focus for me, okay, minion? Skylar looked into Ari's pretty, clear blue eyes and saw the seriousness in them. Skylar nodded and tried to ignore everything else. Okay, I'll focus. Thank you, Ari said with one of her dazzling smiles that made Skylar feel like she was lighting up inside. Even with the scars that ran across her face, Ari was the most beautiful person in the whole wide world. It gave Skylar hope that one day, even with the red birthmark on her face, that people might think that she was beautiful too. I need you to give Cam a message for me. Skylar's shoulders drooped. I can't. He's gone. The smile immediately fell from Ari's face, and her feelings of fear and crushing disappointment strangled Skylar's heart with a painful squeeze. Uncontrollable tears sprung from Skylar's eyes as a silent sob gnawed at her throat. She felt like her world was crumbling into tiny pieces, but before she could start wailing, the feelings vanished as quickly as they appeared, and the only feelings Skylar felt were her own. It was as though there was an emotional shield around Ari now, and her face had become almost as emotionless as a mask. Sorry about that, Ari said with a glint of curiosity in her eyes as she gently wiped away Skylar's tears. She didn't know that without Soren, Skylar felt everything. But what do you mean he's gone? Where did he go? Everyone went crazy after you disappeared, and Val and Soren got taken by Anixaman, Skylar said with a sniff and a swipe at her leaky nose. They took Val too? Ari sat back and started breathing slowly through her nose while she held her head, as if she had a massive headache. Uh-huh, Skylar said softly, not wanting to cause her any more pain. Grandma, Mara, and Gordon were super angry that you all left Scion's Keep. All the adults were yelling at each other about how to find you and how to get Val and Soren back. Then Alvaro had a vision of Cam and him talking with your friends in some cemetery. So they decided that some of us would stay here, while some others would go with Cam and Alvaro to meet up with your friends. And Grandma Mara and my uncles would go after Val and Soren. How did they know that I wasn't taken by Anaximander? Enzo saw it. Alvaro told him that you and Val were in trouble, so he hitched onto his bird, Armand, and made him fly after you guys. He saw you disappear right before the bad guys in black suits got Val in an alleyway. Then Enzo followed their car and saw them take Soren too. He had gone after you when Alvaro said you were in trouble. But then the bad guys drove too far away, so Enzo couldn't see where they took him, because the connection broke between him and Armand. Ari closed her eyes and took another long, deep breath. Skylar couldn't feel her emotions anymore, but she could tell that Ari was upset. She sat down next to Ari and held her hand to comfort her, then leaned against her strong, warm side to get some comfort from her as well. Enzo says that every day the sun rises is a good day. Some days the clouds get in the way and you have to search harder to find the good, but it's always there. After a long sigh, Ari said, Enzo is a wise man. Yeah, he is, Skylar agreed. And when Soren first got taken, Ari corrected absently. Taken, Skylar amended. I could feel how scared and confused he was, and it made my heart hurt so bad that all I wanted to do was cry forever. But then one morning the fear was all gone, and instead there was a warm hope, right here. Skylar tapped over her heart and looked up at Ari with a reassuring smile. And I found the good, because he's being brave. I can feel it. So if he can be brave where he is, then we can be brave too, right? Ari smiled down at her and nodded. Yes, we can. I'll bring Soren back to you. I promise. Her voice was firm with determination. Skylar nodded back, feeling much better, because she knew if Ari said it, then it had to be true. Ari would rescue Soren, and they could be a little family again. So Cam left to meet up with my friends? Ari asked quietly as she looked up at the bright twinkling stars. Yeah, but before they left, he came up here to say goodbye to me, and he promised me that no matter what, he'd find you and bring you home. He came up here to say goodbye to you? Ari asked with a smile, as though the thought of it made her happy. Skylar smiled and nodded. She liked Cam. He was really funny and nice, and he always made her feel like she was special. He gave me a big squeezy hug and said that George, Miles, Joshua, Hugo, Wyatt, and Randall were going with them too, so that they'd be safe. She ticked all the names off on her fingers to help her remember who had gone. Cam said that the adults didn't want Joshua to go at first, but he insisted and said that he had to help find you. So Hugo said that he would go too, and Gordon made both Randall and Wyatt go with them, so they'd be super safe. But that's all I know, because I've been up here, and George was the one telling us everything. Ari turned to look over at Skylar's tent. You've been staying up here with Enzo this entire time? Yeah. Before Soren went after you, he told me to stay here with old Enzo. So that's what I'm doing till he gets back, Skylar said as she plucked a blade of grass from the ground and began rolling it around between her hands. Had a bit of a sneezing fit there. Back to the story. Maren and Gordon tried to make me come back downstairs, but I took off my cuff and put it with Soren's in Enzo's house and went invisible every time they tried. They never found me, 'cause I'm the bestest at hiding and being really quiet. After a while, they gave up and put the tent up here for me to sleep in, 'cause there's really no room for me in Enzo's house. She rolled the blade around and around in her hands until it became a little ball. She liked the way it felt between her palms. Promise me that you'll make good choices and do what Enzo tells you to, okay? I promise. Skylar held up her open hand and flicked the little green ball she'd made in a high arc off into the distance, way farther than she'd ever been able to do before. A thought occurred to her that caused her to turn back to Ari with an excited gasp. Now you're back, Cam and the rest of them can come home, and everyone can help you go after Soren and Thou. Ari shook her head with a sad, regretful look on her face. I'm not really back at Scion's Keep, Skylar. This is just a dream. A dream? Now that she thought about it, it would explain the fish and monsters. Skylar studied Ari. She seemed different from the other people in her dream. She seemed more real, and Skylar had been able to feel her feelings. She hadn't been able to do that with Enzo when he'd been playing for her earlier. I know it's really you, so you're here, but not really here? Ari nodded. Sometimes I can visit people in their dreams. That's kind of like what my mommy can do, but she did it in real life, not in dreams. What do you mean? Mommy's body can be in one place, and a copy of her, like a ghost, can go someplace else. But only the people that she wants to see her copy can see it. Kind of like what I can do with my real body. Skylar scrunched up her face as she tried to remember. Whenever she did it, her body looked like she was sleeping. Her eyes didn't go all white and scary like Enzo's do when he's hitching on the animals. Ari seemed to be mulling the information over, but Skylar didn't want to think or talk about her mommy anymore. It still hurt her heart that her mommy's copy never visited them at Scion's Keep, and the sea monsters were still too fresh in her mind. So if you're not here, then where are you really? Skylar asked as she picked a daisy from the ground that hadn't been there a moment before. Well, Ari began, then let out a soft chuckle as she shook her head. Let's just say I'm in a safe place where no one will be able to find me. I'll find a way to come back as soon as I'm strong enough. Skylar plucking the white petals off the daisy. Skylar began plucking the white petals off the daisy, but no matter how many petals she plucked, the amount of petals didn't seem to get any less. So you were able to get away from the darkness? She asked, as she continued to pick the never-ending petals. Alvaro said you were surrounded by evil darkness. Ari nodded, but she seemed sad about it. I got away from the darkness, but before I could, it hurt my friends, Adam and Jean-Baptiste, very badly. And it made me, sick, she said as though it was hard to find the right word to describe it. So I did what I had to do to get us away, and I looked into finding a place where we can heal. Skylar didn't want Ari to be sick. Are you and your friends feeling better? Ari nodded with a small smile as she brought her arm around Skylar's shoulders. Skylar smiled with relief, but then Ari's head turned to look at a space beside Enzo's house. Skylar's heart began to race, fearing that the sea monsters were back. She forced herself to look too, but there was nothing there. What are you looking at? She whispered. Ari lifted her into a tight hug. I have to go now, minion. No, you can't. I don't want you to go. Skylar wrapped her arms around Ari's neck, hoping that maybe if she held on to her tight enough, she wouldn't be able to leave. Please stay with me. It's nice here. We could stay here together forever. I wish we could, but you're waking up, Ari said while rubbing Skylar's back in comforting circles. I promise I'll come back to you in real life as soon as I can. But until then, we have to be brave like Soren, all right? Skylar reluctantly nodded against Ari's shoulder. Ari gently pulled her away so she could look in her eyes. Let me redo that. Ari gently pulled her away so she could look her in the eyes. If you see Cam before I get back, please tell him that I'm safe and that the shades won't bother anyone ever again. Okay. And if he doesn't believe you, say, Transit umbra, elu per sta. Skylar looked back at her blankly. Say it back to me, minion. This is important. Skylar didn't want to disappoint Ari, so she used all her mental strength to remember the phrase and remember it correctly. Transit umbra, 8 lux per stat. Close enough, Ari said with a smile. I love you, Skylar. Skylar felt the warmth of love surround and radiate through her, making her feel much better. I love you too, Ari. Almost as soon as the words left her lips, Ari disappeared with a whoosh of air. Finding herself all alone, Skylar slumped down onto the grass in a boneless heap, letting the suddenly petalless stem of the daisy fall from her hand. She didn't have long to feel bereft, though. However, before she heard a voice call her back to consciousness. Skylar, the voice urged in a whisper. Come on, little sprite. Wake up. Skylar opened her eyes to see Enzo crouched in the opening of her tent, gently shaking her left foot by her big toe. When he saw that her eyes were open, he put a finger to his lips to make sure she stayed silent, then beckoned her to come closer with his other hand. Quickly brushing away the cobwebs of sleep, Skylar eagerly obeyed. When she was close, he whispered in her ear, Whatever happens, stay invisible until I say otherwise. You hear? Skylar was confused and worried, but she was determined to be brave, and she had promised Ari that she'd do what Enzo told her to. Without a word, she gave him a single nod of understanding and promptly disappeared. I was about to move on as if I'm reading this alone. That was the end of Chapter 2 of Dissident by Lisa Beeson, Book 4 of the Transcendent series. And that was 28 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and stop this and restart for Chapter 3. Whoop, whoop. Thank you for joining us. And what a interesting chapter that was. And what on earth could be going on that Enzo would wake her from her sleep and tell her to disappear? What in the world indeed? I guess we'll have to wait to find out. Peace.